All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating lecture, specifically Chapter 4, titled What is Abundance?, given back on May 19, 1991 at Osaka-jo Hall. This isn't your standard financial guide, not at all. Instead, this material takes us on a journey that blends the psychology of wealth with deep spiritual frameworks and even macroeconomic theory. We're starting deep inside the human subconscious, mapping out the spiritual consequences of our everyday attitudes and scaling all the way up to the rise and fall of entire nations. It's a comprehensive framework that challenges us to fundamentally rethink what it actually means to be truly prosperous. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to move from the micro to the macro. First, how mindset shapes reality. Then, spotting patterns of failure. Third, testing your attachments. Fourth, the spiritual value of wealth. And finally, we'll look at the push toward utopian economics. Let's get into it.
Right out of the gate, this 1991 lecture drops a massive philosophical anchor. Thoughts alone created the universe. Think about that for a second. The idea here is that if a divine force created the cosmos simply through thought, then as human beings, our own thoughts hold that exact same generative power. We kind of have a habit of treating our minds as passive observers, just watching the world happen to us. But this text insists that our mindsets are active engines, literally constructing the reality we experience every single day.
Kicking things off with Part 1, Mindset Shapes Your Reality, focusing on the sheer power of inner thoughts.
So imagine going to a higher power with a laundry list of daily anxieties. Money stress, career roadblocks, relationship drama. The speaker uses this really brilliant metaphor here. Picture a mechanical handle, like a dial, right in the center of your chest. From a divine perspective, human worries are incredibly minor, and we're already equipped with the mechanics to just turn them off. You have the style. Turn it one way and you manifest solutions in abundance. Turn it the exact opposite way and you generate fear and roadblocks. The underlying point is profound. Your reality is determined entirely by where you choose to set the dial of your own mind.
But what actually happens when we turn that dial the wrong way? Well, the lecture points out a pretty startling psychological trap. Sometimes, believe it or not, we actually want to fail. When life or our relationships just get too heavy, some people subconsciously invite illness as a socially acceptable escape hatch. Think about it. Being sick means responsibilities vanish and you get sympathy instead of expectations. Similarly, if you're constantly blaming the economy, the government, or just bad luck, the text argues that's a subconscious strategy to avoid the hard work of personal growth. We have to be really honest with ourselves to ensure we aren't secretly falling in love with our own excuses.
Which brings us to Section 2, Beware Patterns of Failure, where we look at the spiritual consequences of our mindset.
Now this is where things get really vivid. The text maps these everyday bad habits to very specific spiritual realms. Take extreme greed, for example. The desire to just take without ever giving back. The lecture maps that directly to the hungry ghost hell, or gaki. The idea is that those obsessed with entitlement find themselves in a realm of eternal starvation. There's this vivid illusion described where these spirits see a delicious bunch of bananas, but the second they reach out to eat them, the fruit just bursts into flames and turns to ash. Crazy, right? Then there's the Asura hell, which is for folks who spent their lives constantly complaining and blaming others. They get locked in exhausting perpetual conflict. And leaders who actively mislead the masses into destructive ideologies, they face an even deeper isolation in the infinite hell.
The lecture doesn't just stop at individuals, though. It zooms out to look at entire political philosophies, like Marxism, viewing them almost like massive century-long historical experiments. The framework argues that systems built on justifying poverty basically operate by shifting the blame to others, specifically the successful. And by doing that, the text suggests these ideologies institutionalize a destructive jealousy. They completely strip away a person's individual agency and their motivation to create honest wealth.
All right, moving on to Section 3, Testing Your Attachments. Let's look at the Guardian Spirit Thought Experiment.
This leads us to a really crucial question, one you kind of have to ask yourself. Just how strong are your financial attachments? Now, wanting to be financially secure is one thing, right? But the text gives a heavy warning about toxic attachments. Wealth itself is seen as completely neutral, but an absolute obsession with material wealth, to the point where you forget your spiritual nature or cross ethical boundaries, that's what creates a massive spiritual burden.
To actually test this, the lecture introduces a really fascinating thought experiment. I want you to picture a guardian spirit standing right over your shoulder, 24 hours a day. They're watching every single business deal, every transaction, every fleeting thought you have about money. The test is simple. If this invisible observer sees exactly how you earn your living, do you feel a massive sense of pride? Are they nodding in approval at your honest, hard work?
If so, great. Your pursuit of wealth is healthy. But if you feel a sting of shame, or if you're kind of hoping this spirit looks the other way because your methods are a little deceitful or overly greedy, well, then your attachment to money has become spiritually dangerous.
That sets us up perfectly for Section 4, the spiritual value of wealth, looking at money as an actual force for good.
Think about it like this. If society universally declares that money is fundamentally evil, well, then who ends up with all the money? Only the people who don't care about ethics. The lecture paints a really stark contrast here. If selfish actors control the economy, they inevitably expand societal suffering. But if good, virtuous people accumulate wealth, they can use that economic power to lift others up. Because of that, the text argues that for a person of good character, actively striving for financial success isn't just acceptable, it's actually a moral imperative.
So, the assertion here is that modern wealth, when it's generated through honest, hard work, is a definitive moral good. Why? Because it literally builds the hospitals, reduces crime, and actively prevents earthly suffering. There's a very practical point made regarding humanitarian work. Treating the sick and destitute is obviously noble, but in a truly healthy, wealthy society, that level of systemic poverty shouldn't even exist in the first place. Strong, honest economics create the infrastructure and the jobs that prevent that suffering from happening. Honest business isn't just about personal profit, it's the actual engine that builds a safer, healthier world.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Toward Utopian Economics and Achieving Societal Prosperity. Here, the lecture makes a super sharp macroeconomic distinction. It champions absolute equality of opportunity at the starting line, arguing that everyone starts equally as a child of God. But, and this is a big but, it strongly warns against enforcing equality of outcome. The logic is that if you guarantee the exact same reward to the person who works tirelessly and the person who simply chooses to be lazy, you completely destroy the human drive for progress and innovation. When analyzing the geopolitical landscape, the text impartially points to a couple of major red flags that cause once prosperous nations to decline. Things like widespread corporate tax evasion and, frankly, rewarding laziness over effort. If a society is fundamentally built on evading contribution, it's doomed. Plus, when a culture starts punishing its most productive members while rewarding those who don't contribute, it essentially incentivizes a downward spiral. A truly healthy nation celebrates, and yes, appropriately taxes, honest success to fuel the greater good.
Which brings us to the ultimate solution proposed by the lecture, utopian economics. And no, this isn't some fantasy world where money magically doesn't exist. It's actually a very grounded economic state where personal ambition and societal contribution are perfectly aligned. Individuals are encouraged to dream massive dreams, work hard, and generate total abundance. But the catch is that this abundance has to be born from providing real value and honest innovation. In this system, the richer the individual gets, the more society benefits through job creation, new ideas, and tax revenue. It's the ultimate marriage of personal prosperity and public good.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative thought. We've gone from that invisible dial in your chest all the way to the macroeconomics of a utopian society. And the core message from this 1991 lecture is crystal clear. Abundance is absolutely not a sin, it's a responsibility. It demands that we constantly check our mindset, ditch the comforting excuses, and ensure our daily work is something our guardian spirit would actually applaud. So take a hard look at your own goals today. Are they just feeding an endless hungry ghost of personal attachment? Or are you building something that could genuinely leave this world a little richer and a little brighter than how you found it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.